Shalom everybody and welcome back to Old Soul Torah. As you can see, it is raining today, and the reason is because I live in a tropical rainforest. And so it rains quite often, so I'm going to make the intro brief and then we're going to go right into the teaching. The context of today's lesson is when Abraham comes back from Egypt back to Canaan. If you remember, there was a famine in the land and he had to go with Sarah, his wife, to Egypt, and he brought his nephew Lot. Well, while they were in Egypt, different things happened, different things unfolded, to the extent that when they returned to Canaan, they returned with wealth. And that is the topic of today's lesson, is what does wealth do to people? Or I should say, what does blessing do to people? So blessing sometimes makes a person better off in life, and sometimes blessing can corrupt the state of the individual. It can change them, and especially when it comes to money and wealth and power and status. When one can come into it, it can either make you a better person or make you worse. And that's what we're going to be exploring this week's Parsha, the contrast between Abraham and his nephew Lot. They both came back with enough wealth that they could live happily for the rest of their life on the land, except what the wealth did to them led them inevitably to split up. Here's a few interesting things to look at. First, when they're describing the land that they had to share, it said the land, or onkelos, Targum says it's the people of the land, could not support them staying together. They couldn't figure out how two very distinct people could be sharing the land together. And twice it says, the second time, could not remain together, to emphasize just how impossible the situation was for them to be on the same page at a time in life where their destiny was changing. Next, we see the two households were quarreling, the herders of Abraham and of Lot's cattle. Go down to the verse 8. Here Abraham is proposing that they separate. Let there be no strife between us. He doesn't want bad energy, bad vibes, no grudges, no resentment. We are kin, we are family, but the proposal is, let us separate. So this is the real difference in Lot and Abraham, was their character and their response to blessing and fortune when it came into their life in the form of wealth. For Avraham, it humbled him. The very first thing he did when he came back into Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is he built an altar to Hashem. The text doesn't say that Lot built any altar to Hashem. Lot just started changing overnight. For Lot, the wealth inflated him. For Avraham, it humbled him. For Lot, wealth became his new identity, his new destiny, everything he wanted to ever become. It became first in his life, his priority, his idol. It was more important than Abraham's mission. And Abraham saw how weak his spirit was, how easily corrupted he can become when he tastes approval and power and money and status. Lot became a different person. And this is what we have to understand. Lot could spend his entire life, much of his entire life, in the same footsteps as Abraham. But whatever he encountered, whatever godliness he encountered, was only on the surface level. He never allowed it to penetrate inwardly. He never allowed himself to internalize God's presence and God's spirit. And most importantly, to prioritize it beyond and above everything else. So we're going to be looking at a fascinating commentary from the Be'er Mayim Chaim, a Hasidic master originally from Galicia, where my mother's family is from, in Ukraine. And he eventually, in the early 19th century, he moved to Tzfat, Israel, the city of the mystics in the mountains. And he wrote this unbelievable commentary to the Torah based on Hasidic and mystical sources. And he says the following insight. And God said to Abraham, after Lot separated from him, lift up your eyes and see. As long as Lot was with him, the divine speech could not be revealed to Abraham in its full inner purity. For Abraham's spiritual vessel was being blocked by Lot, whose presence represented a mixture of light
with impurity. But once the good separated from the unrefined, the upper voice descended upon Abraham in holiness and clarity. The separation itself was the cause that allowed revelation to rest upon him. So essentially, Abraham remained in Canaan. Lot pitched his tent near Sodom, and the inhabitants of Sodom are wicked, as we know. And only afterwards does Hashem say to Abraham, after Lot had parted from him, to raise your eyes and look out. And then you go down to verse 15, for I will give you all the land that you see. The promise comes after the separation.
Friends, this is what I appreciate about the Torah so much, is that the Torah is not just there to make us feel good. Sometimes it's telling us necessary truths, even if they're painful sometimes. And this is one of them, the separation of Abraham and his nephew Lot. A little bit of the background of Lot. Lot was his nephew. Why do we hear about Lot so much in the Torah? And that is because Abraham had a brother who died young. And he left a son behind, which Abraham was forced to raise. But if you remember in the beginning of this week's Parshat Lech Lecha, when God says, go out for yourself, Lech Lecha, and it says that you shall leave behind your birthplace, your father's house, the customs, the values, the ways of thinking of your past, and go to the land that I will show you. From that point on, the prophecy that God was going to reveal to Abraham kind of shut off, because God says, I'll go to the land that I will show you, meaning I'll show you where the land is and what your promises are once you get there. But it never happened until what? Until the separation took place. As soon as Abraham separated from his nephew Lot, the next verse is already, and God said unto Abraham, and he began to talk about his future destiny. The sages of Israel have noticed this and said the following: maybe at the beginning of the Parsha, when God sends Abraham forth and he says, you need to separate yourself from even your family members, not the immediate family like his wife, but his extended family, the family he was born into, the culture he was born into, that way of thinking he was born into. The question is, why did Abraham bring with him his nephew Lot? Lot was old enough to take care of himself at this point. But if you notice, Lot became the thing to spiritually block Abraham. Abraham is the midah of chesed. He's the attribute of loving kindness and compassion. And a lot of his tests that he had to go through in his personal life is how to don't let compassion, don't let kindness always get in the way of destiny. Because sometimes kindness could backfire. Sometimes kindness ends up hurting you. And this is a teaching that we don't speak about enough. We don't talk about it because it's an uncomfortable subject. But the reality is clear. There's certain participants in our life that sometimes they're good people. They're good people. They're not evil. They're just, their value system is different than yours. Their paradigm is different than yours. And sometimes you will outgrow them. Sometimes you need to let go. Sometimes you need to make space for what the higher calling or spirit is coming to inform you. The next step in your destiny. The next step in God's plan for you. So one of the things I want to leave you with is that separation doesn't mean abandonment. It just means taking a safe space away from those loved ones who you can't grow together with anymore. Okay, but the responsibility is still there towards them. For example, after Lot separates from Avraham, he gets into a lot of trouble. And Avraham allows him to just experience what he needs to experience, because maybe that's the only way his soul will learn, right? Some people don't learn when you give them advice. They have to go through it by themselves. So Avraham allows Lot that space to do that. However, when Lot's his very life is in danger, Avraham shows up. Avraham comes, assembles an army, and they go in for the rescue operation. So this is a very, very important concept to remember. In the Torah it says, Al tamod al dam re'echa, do not stand idly, do not be passive when the blood of your brother is being spilt. When you have hostages, when you have loved ones, anyone from your earth tribe who's in trouble, then Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Lazeh, all of Israel is responsible one for the other. We do have loyalty and responsibility towards our loved ones. And so this isn't a kind of, just the idea of using growth as an excuse for indifference is not a Jewish idea. We're never indifferent. We just respect and honor the idea, the truth, that we are very different. We're a very diverse bunch. And within your own family, you're going to have the stronger ones and weaker ones, the difficult ones, the ones who always have success and victory. And so we have to learn how to live with each other as family, as friends, as community.
Distance does not equal abandonment. Growth does not equal indifference. Love just changes form.
What I get from the Torah reading this week is that it's absolutely necessary to do a Lech Lecha of your own, to go forth, to spring forth from your father's house, from your birthplace, from the culture, and go and explore life on its own, right? Go and take your journey. But remember, the people that play an important part in your journey are not necessarily the same people that you want to surround yourself with your destiny. It's two different things. And at the end of the day, just because we're taking some time and distance away from certain people, we still need to show up when being called upon. All good things in all good time. God bless from strength to strength. We'll see you next Torah class. Please, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe in order to be a member of the tribe. We accept people from all backgrounds, all walks of faith, who are looking, seeking to serving Hashem, the Blessed One, the Almighty One in truth.